Welcome once again to 26 North Halsted. I'm your host, George Blaise. This week, having a conversation with an old guest of the program. If you've been a fan for the last 15, 20 years, you've seen this guy on my show many times before. We've both grown a little grayer, a little older, but we're still talking about important things dealing with technology, social impact, and its effect on you and yours. Joining me today is Chris Foltz, currently Managing Director for Responsible Solutions Limited. Chris, it is such a pleasure to get back in touch with you and to see you on the program again.
I couldn't be more excited to be here. I mean, you said old a lot of times in the intro, George, so I'm just going to be honest. You're my favorite host in the world, so it's always an honor to be here with you.
It's fantastic to have you. Don't have a lot of time with you today, but hopefully this will be a series of programs we'll do here. But, one of the things that was on my mind, as I was thinking about what to talk to you about, because there's so many areas that you're an expert in, I was thinking about, okay, so let's go back to like 2005, 2006. Tom Friedman puts this book out, The World is Flat. It kind of talks about how supply chaining and outsourcing is going to change the dynamics in economics and business and how it works. And certainly a lot of what he had to say, it's like a Bible. It came true. But then 2020 comes. We have the pandemic. We have governments across the world locking down the human capital and kind of upending everything. And the resiliency of individuals to come up with new innovations and new ways to look at doing business and communicating is really what's brought us forward and changed everything. In your assessment, what's the positive we can draw from what happened during the lockdowns in terms of business?
It's a very interesting, with AI and everything that's out right now, I'm doubling down on human beings. And I think what happened during the pandemic is it really caused people to look within, see what they're capable of, really looking at the prospects of humanity and where they play a role in it. And I don't think that was always the case. In the past, we were moving towards more of a specialized universe. Everyone has to be specialized. And what I'm realizing is some of the strongest people that I work with are generalists. And there's an entire new market for this. Polymathy, the world of right, left brain individuals coming in, defying the status quo. That's where we're at right now in society, George. And I couldn't be more happy.
And this is kind of a term that may be new to a lot of viewers. But when we talk about polymaths, we're talking about people who have a depth of knowledge across a broad spectrum of topics or issues. And being a musician, one of my most innovative guitarists out there right now is Tosin Abasi, and he leads a band called Animals as Leaders. Polymaths as leaders is kind of your philosophy when you're dealing in this area, is it not?
Well, it wasn't my philosophy originally, right? I had to be wrangled into this. I spent my entire life being various capacities of specialist, and there was a great team of people doing a lot of research on polymathy. I got involved with it. And when I did my fellowship, and I'm talking to some of these large CMOs, CMO of McDonald's, L'Oreal, and I'm seeing them talk about polymathy. They want to hire people with this left-right brain. I was somewhat shocked by it, but also very thankful. It is the way of the future. It is what the next generation's all about. I'm honored to be at the kind of forefront of the research in this space, but there is a lot of great polymaths before us. What do we do now to help understand these people before they die? Because that's often what happens. We wait till after they're gone before we're impacted by them.
Chris, before the lockdowns happened, one of the most exciting areas, of course, was content creation. People were figuring out how to monetize just being themselves and putting it out there. Of course, big corporations saw what was happening, saw a bigger piece of the pie going towards the content creators and started to change and fuss with the metrics and the rules of how people get paid. And I think the lockdown happened right at the moment people were realizing, hey, something's wrong here. Have we hit a reset in terms of content creators and entrepreneurship, in terms of not everybody's going to be able to go on and raise their own money and get their own subscription base without the help of digital platforms like YouTube or what have you, but there's a lot of people out there who have great content to share.
I agree with you. There's a lot of great content, but there's almost too much content, and there's a difference between having content and putting something out there and saying something. Just like in public relations, people would always kind of say, Chris, I want to be in the news. How do I get in the news? Well, it's very simple. Do something newsworthy, right? That's how you get in the news. Same thing when it comes down to these content creators. I think that now corporations are looking for authentic voices, right? Authenticity is the new disruptive, George. So if you have content that's going out there, people can tell if you're authentic. People can tell if you're spending more time focusing on your own personal algorithm or if you're spending all your time trying to win the digital algorithms. There's a big difference. Say something. That's how you get to the core of the universe.
And you've had time to spend and have conversations and be in rooms with a lot of the big corporations and digital platforms that we're talking about out here and people who work with them. Are they shaken up by the fact that people are starting to realize that, hey, I deserve a bigger piece of the pie when dealing with this digital platform? Perhaps I need to go out on my own?
Well, there was the whole B2B world, business to business, the business to consumer world. Now it's the direct to consumer approach. We're moving away from the kind of idea of short-term shareholder gains and moving in society more towards a long-term stakeholder value growth proposition. And a lot of this has been led by the kind of venture space, but large corporations with things like ESG scores, sustainable development goals, they're finding different ways to actually reach out to their stakeholders. Matter of fact, 10 years ago, George, we didn't even use words like stakeholders. It's like their audience, their customers. Customers don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. And you do that by relating to them. That's the key to everything. So more brands are taking the time to actually relate to their stakeholders for the first time ever.
And how has that changed the environment, particularly when we're talking about, lots of money out there to be invested, and venture capitalists are looking for new ideas and new innovation and things to put their money behind. For people who are watching today who are aspiring entrepreneurs and want to get in the game, what is the money backing up these days?
You know what? I have the honor of serving as the global entrepreneur in residence for the largest accelerator in the world, Founder Institute. And, so you get the opportunity to see companies from a different perspective. I work in 32 different countries around the world. And what you're actually noticing, and it's kind of the same, large corporations, they're good at scaling things, commercializing things. But when it comes to innovation, believe it or not, it's harder for these large corporations to innovate. They're turning to the startup world. When I did my fellowship at the Institute for Real Growth, I was the one talking about startups in a room of all corporate leaders. It didn't make sense to them. And I told them I was going into the space of startups. I did. And now what I'm seeing is some of these prolific leaders from large corporations are breaking off, starting their own investment funds, starting their own mentorship and advising practices. And, that is going to be what brings the greatest innovations to the world. I'm super excited about it.
Well, Chris, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to go back to what you mentioned briefly, artificial intelligence. And I think this is one of those things that, I'm not foreboding of darkness or the end of the world like Peter Zian, but there's something about this that people really need to investigate and think about when celebrating AI. Stay tuned. We'll be back with Chris Foltz in just a moment. Welcome back. Today, talking with Chris Foltz, Managing Director of Responsible Solutions Limited. Chris, this issue of artificial intelligence, I thought it was something important to talk to you while I had time with you because it's exciting, it's innovative. People are playing with Chat GPT and stuff out here. But, being in the media and knowing journalists and working with journalists, there's a lot of areas in which AI and generative AI, whether it's creating art or creating content and writing stories, what have you, it's going to supplant and take over a lot of jobs in this industry in particular. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that dynamic of artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, although it has the word artificial in there, there's a lot of real stuff coming out of this space. And, one of the scary things is that what is it going to do to humans, right? What is it going to do to our ability to learn and become better? Already you see places like Google who are going to lower rank certain things. They're able to detect if AI is involved in the equation. Of course, at the same time that they're developing their own AI, and most likely those will rank higher on the search engines. Again, I couldn't be more serious about the fact that now is the time to double down on human intelligence, right? Human innovation, the prospects of humanity. Artificial intelligence is a tool. It's moved from a buzzword to a usable tool now, but let's just not forget that it's a tool. Humans are the ones who created it in the first place. That's where the real innovation lives.
And that's really, what you've been dedicated and involved in the last few years is, creating these communication channels between kind of the old school and how they do business and what's going on and innovative on the ground. I know you've done a lot of work out on the West Coast with the cannabis industry here in Illinois since the last time I spoke to you. They've legalized cannabis. A lot of licenses are out there. I know a couple of people who have licenses and are trying to figure out how to get everything going. Am I wrong in kind of when I hear what people are talking about and saying to them, you know what, you might be better off just holding on to this license a couple of years and just selling it outright to someone else than getting involved in something that I think is still beyond us in a lot of ways?
Illinois is a very interesting space for cannabis. I think we have holdings in maybe 13 different states. So we see it from this different perspective. I worked as an executive in the largest media company in cannabis. And, when you do things for the right reasons, they won't end for the wrong reasons. In Nevada, when licenses first came out, everyone was sitting on these licenses. What people don't realize is that a license is simply a piece of paper. The value of it's going to drop. What is not just a piece of paper is when you build a sustainable business model, when you prove up and get your occupancy permits. And what I'm really interested in is seeing states like Illinois put more money into the development of some of these social equity programs, but for real, not just buzzwords, giving people a real pathway to opening their doors. We shouldn't be the only ones creating an accelerator in San Francisco for cannabis companies. Right now, I'm working with a team called BIPOC Can in Colorado. They're actually building upstream mentorship programs so people that are getting these licenses actually understand what it goes into running a business. And you need that knowledge whether you plan on selling a license, if you want to get the value for it, or whether you want to operate. I'm inspired by what I'm seeing, George, but at the end of the day, this is about something that's supposed to help our community, not hinder it. And that's where I'm at. I care more about the educational outcomes that come from the dollars from cannabis more than I care about just the plant itself.
And Chris, that's so important, and it's kind of a long way to get around to talking about this issue of, here locally, we're in the midst of changing over a new dynamic with the mayor of Chicago's race. There's, many people, 50% of people think that, business and the economy is the way to go. 50% of people are really focused on social issues and social impact. I think, and I glean from what you've been working on, what you're doing, that you always have to consider the social impact if you're going to have a long-range dynamic and scalable business of any kind. Talk to me a little bit about how important it is for people to understand that, yes, we have to have vigorous environment for business to flourish, but without the social impact part of it and thinking about the human consequence, none of it's going to matter.
You have two fairly interesting mayoral candidates in Chicago right now. I've been following this race. I get the ability to talk to some of them throughout all of it. And they're both from an education background, right? Which is, you really don't see that very often. But one of the things I'm not hearing about very often in the campaign is what they're doing for education. Now, I know that's not running for school board president, but it is still the leader of one of the largest metropolitan communities in the world. So Chicago should be leading the charge on things. There's a huge gap here in Nevada. We're ranked as one of the lowest ranking school systems in the entire world, right here in the state of Nevada. And I see the prospects of Chicago are so much brighter for this. But here's the thing, George. I sat in rooms with some of the greatest leaders in social impact, some of the greatest leaders in education. I learned more from a fourth grade teacher about education system in Illinois than I learned from any of those rooms that I'm in with the people that are supposed to be the leaders of this. Same thing for social impact. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time working the recovery space. Obviously, I went through drug addiction years before my life, but I didn't realize how much trauma stands in the way of people getting to their social impact goals, to their career goals and everything. So for the last while here, I've been studying on the psychology of things because everybody wants to give back. Everybody wants to make a difference. Sometimes there's a barrier where people think that they're not capable of doing it, some sort of learned helplessness. So I'm spending my time going upstream from acceleration to eliminate these kind of gaps and barriers for humans so they can actually get to the purpose. It's always purpose over passion for me, George. Even though I'm a fairly passionate person, purpose over passion is the core of my life.
And it's been working, and it's been working for you and for the people that lives you've touched over the years. We'll take another short break. Back with more Chris Foltz in just a moment. Welcome back. Today, talking with Chris Foltz. This is kind of just a primer for a series of interviews. We'll dig down deeper and more specific issues in further programs. But I just wanted to reintroduce you to our audience and give people a kind of an idea of where you're coming from and a lot of the things in your background. One of the things, when I first met you, you were really doing a thing of connecting technology and innovation to social impact on the west side of Chicago. You opened up an office in the hood, and you were using technology, robotics, urban gardening, and really seeing how technology could be developed to use for the people who can really use it most. And I know now that you're working with countries and people across the planet here, you see a lot of through lines in terms of the developing world. You almost have to look at many parts of our city as the developing world as well, but there's opportunity there.
There is. And, it's very weird. I traveled the whole world to realize how important cities like Chicago are. And, Chicago's got so much heart, but there's also access to things that we take for granted in places like Chicago. For instance, in Ghana, they don't even have a recycling program, right? So when you don't have a recycling program, you don't have things like aluminum. You don't have things that you can actually repurpose. So what they've done there is literally taken junk and made vehicles out of it, made it sustainable energy systems and all this. And that's exactly what we were doing in the west side of Chicago. The only reason I ended up leaving from Chicago is because I wanted to collect rainwater on the roofs and make it potable for people. And unfortunately, at the time, city ordinances presented that. So it's amazing to see how much government and everything empowers people to do great things, but they also take that away as well. So for Chicago to really be a leading destination for this, they really need to take a look at the government structures, the incentives. Founder Institute has a phenomenal program in Chicago. Justin Jacobson, who leads that program, is one of the foremost experts in the world. It's about bringing these programs into the younger generation. I want to see entrepreneurship programs not only in grade school, entrepreneurship, leadership, relationships, all the ships I want to see in grade school, but I also want to see them in jail. I also want to see them where people are starting their lives over. If it wasn't for these things, George, I probably wouldn't know you. I would probably be dead like some of my friends who died from drug addiction. But I was inspired by the prospects of humanity to a point where I never looked back at that again, right? And I think we need to give that message of hope. See, I always thought all my victory and everything in life came from my success, right? And whatever I'd done successful. Everything that matters in my life is come from reacting to and learning from my failures. And Chicago has the ability to do that like no other city in the world.
People might find it hard to believe, but you were, one of the highest young leadership in Illinois Republican youth and campus. How do you rectify that role and also caring so much about people? Because people assume that Illinois Republicans, at least, aren't into the things that you're into. Tell me about that journey in your life.
George, I've had a lot of ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
And it's much easier to explain to people my heroin addiction years ago than it is to explain I was a Republican Party strategist. That seems to fall on deaf ears. I remember on your show in 2016, I believe I was the first person to predict a Donald Trump victory. Doesn't mean I was supporting him, but even walking out of the studio, there was a little bit of an interesting look coming my way.
Yes, of course.
Really what it boils down to is the Republicans have all the organizational structure, right? They know the system of politics. They know how to work with consultants. The Democrats, on the other hand, they have the hearts. They have the people, right? But when it comes down to organizational structure, it's problematic. In Nevada, I'm nonpartisan. I've been involved with races on both sides. I've been in presidential races, involved in high levels on both sides of the aisle. It's really the idea of bipartisan approach, human to human approach. That's the future. So I specifically try to eliminate taking political positions because to me, it's about the kids in society. It's about the neighborhoods. It's about walking down a main street and recognizing it. None of those things come with an R or D next to them. I wear purple all the time, right? So at the end, at least from a color perspective, people know where I stand.
Chris, and I have to ask you this because, you kind of you still have your fingers in the fire in local politics, what have you. I'm really surprised in a way that a person like Adam Kinzinger hasn't, thrown his hat into this Chicago. The Cook County Democratic Organization in general is starting to show cracks in certain areas. And it seems like if you're going to not only have your dedicated Democratic voters out there, even though it's a nonpartisan race for mayor, there's a lot of Democrat by names in the collar counties and the areas around Chicago that are really conservative in their social views, but they call themselves Democrats. Someone like Adam Kinzinger, who appeared, at least when Trump was around, to be a more on the progressively minded, open-minded Republican, didn't make a bigger standing and isn't a more of a figure here in Illinois politics.
And he's a good person too. I mean, I'm from Rockford, Illinois originally. That was part of his district. And I learned about politics in that district. There's a problem with that though. I mean, the cancel culture, if you will, definitely exists inside of politics. People have been scared to stand up to Donald Trump. But I also remember back in the day, people were scared to stand up to Mayor Daley. I remember I was quoted in Newsweek one time. It's the first time in a generation we're going to get away from the stranglehold of the Daley administration. Now, I walked around Chicago like concerned for my life for a period of time when that hit the news. But the simple fact of the matter is change is good. Transformation is good. It doesn't necessarily mean what brand or what form. It's a cyclical process. People like Adam, he knows what he's doing to inspire the community. See, I'm not one to be motivated. It's very hard to motivate me. But if I'm inspired, I become self-motivated. Communities are like this as well, right? So it's about looking at track records, not partisan stances. It's about looking at the politicians that actually govern. There's a big difference between a politician and being somebody that leads in government. What we need is we need to take the people that lead in government, take some of their political acumen from their campaigns and bring it into their actual government service, because then you'll see those fire. You'll see that pit bull tenacious capacity for change that doesn't just exist in the political campaign, but exists when they're in office working for you and I. That's the future. That's what we need to have. And we need leaders that support that.
Well, Chris, that's fantastic. We're going to take another short break. We'll have some closing thoughts in just a moment. Welcome back. A great conversation, wide-ranging, quick-moving, but we only have a half hour at a time. Hopefully, we'll have more with Chris Foltz in the coming weeks, months, and years. Chris, in the last minute or so we have here, what's coming up for you? I understand you're doing a lot in the recovery space.
You know what? I've spent the last couple of years working in acceleration, George, and I'm scared to death that at some point there's going to be a startup with a 92% failure rate in the startup world that has the cure to cancer. But because they didn't understand themselves as founders, as leaders of the company enough, that cure for cancer ends up being a failed startup on the Silicon Valley floor. So we're going upstream to this, and we're focusing on psychology of humans. You'd be surprised how much learned helplessness stands in the way from some prolific leaders making decisions that change the world. So that's really what it is. We want to address things like loneliness with kindness and compassion. We want to find truth, and then we want to accelerate the big changes that we need to solve society's vexing issues. So I couldn't be more happy than to work with an amazing team of people in Los Angeles, Red Door Life, the Evergreen Fund, some of the world's game-changing psychologists. They work with celebrities. They work with everyone that you would think of to eliminate some of the traumas that stand in the way between you and I and our goals in life, you and I and our purpose, and everyone else that we can help. It's a surprising move on my part, but I've never been more excited for anything.
Well, Chris, Managing Director, Responsible Solutions Limited, it's been great talking to you again. Like I said, we're going to have you on again many, many times in the future to get deeper into that. So thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, George. I really appreciate it. Responsible.com for more information about us.
Make sure you log on to that website, and we'll see you next week right here on 26 North Halsted.